네, 이제 곧 발표가 시작될 예정입니다. 참가자 여러분들께서는 자리에
We will soon begin the presentation session. I'd like to ask all the participants to take seats. We're going to have the final presentation session. I'd like to ask all the participants to be seated.
네, 여러분 준비 잘 하셨나요?
First of all, I'd like to thank you for your hard work. Now we were able to really feel the passion of all the participants. And now we're going to have a presentation session of the finalists. In this Korea Africa Youth Ideathon, we will have the 7 mentors who helped the participants and also Mr. Lee Jong-gil of Korea Africa Foundation to deliver the final presentations made by the 6 teams. Now we are going to have the final presentation session. On the first topic of Korea-Africa Joint Agenda for the Climate Change Response, I would like to invite the first team to make their presentation. That's Microbig. Please welcome them with a big hand.
네, 10분 내로 시간을 맞춰 주시기 바랍니다.
So please, in 10 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Yes, good afternoon. And I'm the first speaker for Microbig. And today I'm here to present on the Korea-Africa Joint Agenda for Climate Change Response. And my name is Dela Komik Badago, and I have 3 other team members. So we'll be talking about our plans or strategies towards combating global warming. And before we start, how many of you know that by drinking this 500 millimeters of water, we are producing CO2 that can be produced when we charge 5 phones. So the amount of CO2 in producing this bottle is the same as the amount of CO2 generated when energy is produced to charge 5 different phones in this room. So you can imagine how much CO2 we're generating, how much we need to fight this climate change. So to start off, we'll be talking about the background of our topic. We'll do an analysis and costs and the policies. We'll look at the basis and idea for overcoming these issues. We'll also talk about the expected effects and idea implementation, and finally the conclusion. So let's look at the current status of climate change. And so we can see how the global temperature rise has been increasing over the past 10 decades specifically. We'll look at how we have ocean acidification, and you can see how things are entering the ocean base. We also have sea level rise, where icebergs are melting, and we have we have glacial retreats where you see a lot of sea overflow, and then we have decreased snow cover, and then we have extreme events. There's a lot of tsunamis, there is extreme climate changes, and so we want to focus on one aspect of the global climate, which is plastic production. And plastic production over the past 10 years has increased to about 70%, and we're looking at generation from 2019 expected 2050 increasing to about let's say 10 or more percent. And then we're looking at this in terms of, let's say, power plant. So if you look at this diagram, by 2050 we are looking at generating 2.8 gigatons of CO2, and that's equivalent to 615 coal power plants. And there's been a lot of call to be able to get a net zero CO2 generation. However, the generation rate is actually is against the expected outcome of the global system. And so we are saying that by 2050, if we do not manage this, we're going to have more than 2.7 billion tons of CO2 being produced just from plastics alone. And we're looking at the surge of plastics in Korea, especially in this COVID-19. So between these 2 years, we can see how much it has increased from 11 to 13.5%. And so we are saying that the food delivery industry has also caused a lot of impact in the way that plastics are being generated. Now let's look at plastic issues across Africa. Now this is a typical plastic dam in some African countries. If you look at the picture on the right, you can see a small animal. It's called plankton. Plankton is a very special sea creature that absorbs a lot of CO2. However, because of our disposal of plastics into the ocean bed, these CO2 secretion organisms are killed, and that's also affecting the global carbon balance. So cities in Africa are, of course, having a growing population, and so we are having challenges with disposal of waste and waste management. Now let's look at the life cycle of a plastic. So we have plastic that are used in different forms. So when you first fabricate a plastic, you have the plastic generating CO2, and then when you use and dispose of the plastic, it's hit by the sun and it decomposes. The decomposition releases some methane and some light gases, and those gases also go back into the atmosphere to affect the climate, and those are what we call the VOCs, or the volatile organic compounds. So if you look at here, we look at how CO2 in its, plastics in totality are impacting the environment. And this, again, is just one aspect of the climate change. Now let's look at the need for a total or a comprehensive agenda towards fighting this. So we look at the need to keep the Earth at least below 1.5 degrees. The average temperature of the Earth must be kept for this. And then we're looking at how to protect the ecosystem and the habitat. We're also looking at how to collaborate together, and that's the main agenda of today, how individuals and governments can collaborate together, and finally, how to mobilize funds towards fighting this global challenge. And so let's look at some current policies in Africa. So this, because Africa is a very big continent, of course, there are diverse countries and there are various policies. However, the African Development Bank has put up some funds to champion creating a very clean climate. And so by that, we can say that they've put some funds together for forestry conservation, for renewable energy, for clean transportation, sustainable water and waste management, and also for energy efficiency. And let's look at Korea. And Korea government has put out a few of these other policies, and now they want to reduce plastics by 20% and recycling by 70% by the year 2050. They also want to make sure that they replace most of the single-use plastics and then have multi-use plastics. They want to also reduce or stop importing waste plastics. And then also they want to expand the urban oil field, that's extracting oil from waste vinyl, which is a potential for plastic. And they also look at 100% bioplastic induction in line with carbon utilization in 2050. Okay, now quickly let's look at how these policies have failed. Okay, because this is so why did they fail? So first off, the policies sometimes are inconsistent and irregular. So there is no good communication effort to sensitize and educate the public on how our actions are also contributing to this particular fight and how we can help the government combat this climate change together. We have also lack of appropriate planning by most government and the absence of appropriate marketing strategy for recycled plastic products. There is also lack of coordination between sectors, actors, and government officers. So there's no comprehensive joint agenda, and there is inadequate governance. There is poor technology adoption, lack of appropriate legislation. There is also weak enforcement of existing legislation, and also the lack of sensitization or incentives for the people. So those who do well, how do we get them to do better?
네, 이어서 마이크로빅에서 발표를 맡은 장하영입니다.
I'm Chang Ha-young from the same team, Microbic. Based on the limitations of the policies, we would like to suggest the following solutions. We have divided our solutions into tangible and intangible solutions. And for tangible solutions, we are going to look for plastics alternatives. We are going to promote and provide incentives for R&D for developing plastic substitutes. And second, we are going to encourage the use of multi-use materials and also promote support for ESG management. As for intangible solutions, we need to raise awareness of environmental issues through SNS promotion, and then we also need to promote bottom-up movement in our communities. And then by imposing environment tax, we can have systematic policy framework. Depending on the stakeholders, we need to have different approaches. For individuals and NGOs, they need to carry out campaigns to raise awareness of environment or promote the awareness of using plastic replacements. And for the government and policy aspects, tax on environment can be imposed. And one more example, and that is called smart bins. It can be installed in each local area, and when citizens throw a waste, that will be perceived as a data, and the government will have clear understanding of how much trash is generated for each region and come out with the best policy to manage the waste. By investing in such solutions, we can promote the better management of waste. And this is a business model that we have created based on Green New Deal policies. For this kind of R&D investment in this year, 610 billion won has been budgeted for R&D. By making this kind of investment, the communities can be more environment friendly through bottom-up campaigns and activities. This is the expected benefits. The micro-level benefits is change the individual's mindset about single-use plastics, and then we will eventually create greener environment and develop plastic alternatives, and also innovate technology to tackle climate change. And through such technological innovation, we will also have positive economic impact for the local economy by creating jobs and so on. Even though our start is small, I think it's going to be a great change for ultimate change. That's the time that we can give you. Thank you very much. Please give them a big round of applause. Now, we would like to give the floor to the mentors to give the feedback and also ask questions. So mentors, do you have any comments or questions? Please use the microphone. Thank you very much for your presentation. In terms of defining the problems and in terms of the solution, you have come up with tangible and intangible solutions. And 34 African countries already have policies about plastic waste, and 16 African countries are restricting plastic bags. So I hope you could also reference some of the best practices. Instead of trying to create policies from the empty piece of paper, you can also refer to best practices that are already being implemented and come up with, is there any specific policy that you would like to promote?
I'm not sure that I understand the total question because it's translated, but if you could just summarize a little shortly for me, I would also appreciate it.
Do you have any like best cases already existing in African continent, like a ban of using of vinyl or like plastic? The existing policy from African country, best cases, and how do you want to expand this policy to the other country?
Okay, thank you. I think I can speak specifically from Ghana. I would not say it is the best case, but there's been some new governmental policies, especially with plastics. And recently, the government actually just revealed a new framework for plastic management. And in that framework, there's a very comprehensive net zero plastic use. However, looking at the structure of the economies that are not very much, let me say, totally organized, it's difficult for the government to come up with data on how to manage the plastics. And so taking it from that direction, we're looking at how to empower the people to rather promote data generation for the government. So the government can use that data source from the ground up to be able to manage wastes, because Ghana and most African countries could not pinpoint even how much plastics are even generated within the country. And so using the locals and using even these smart bins, we can effectively collect the data to strengthen the government policies as to knowing how to even recycle the plastics and knowing how to make stringent policies to eliminate the use of the plastics. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I will just tell you a few my impressions. First, your presentation emphasized how urgent the plastic problem is to tackle to climate change. So you mentioned the problem very well. And then regarding fundraising, you also explained the fundraising possibility through the African Development Bank and Korean government program very well. And last but not least, what was particularly impressive in your presentation was problem solving.
네, 시간이 부족해서 조금 짧게
yeah.
말씀 부탁드리겠습니다.
Could you please speak faster because we are running out of time?
So this is a kind of your impressive part of your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
답변, would you like to answer that question?
It was my
It was a comment. All right, ladies and gentlemen, 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.
Please give them a big hand. That was micro big. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now let us move on to the next team. That's 미래 solution or future solution. Please welcome them with big hand. Good afternoon. We are 미래 solution or future solution. And our motto is youth can do it, so we can do it. Our idea is Korea Africa Youth Green Club. So these are the clubs created in universities where Korean African students can meet together to have discussions on the potential ways to respond to climate change. We believe that climate change is a global issue. However, we have to have local approaches and responses. And one solution to that problem would be to have the involvement of the social ventures and SMEs. And we use social innovation in order to come up with creative solutions. So this is the methodology. We can create clubs in universities in the topic of environment. We can also have members both from Korea and African countries, and these members of the clubs will identify issues. And in order to identify the solutions to those identified issues, we'll help have the engagement of local SMEs. And because all the activities occur in a university, we can use a crowdfunding if the project needs financial sources. And if the solution is identified and developed, it could be replicated in other regions and countries. So we start from the university students, where we identify local issues, and with the assistance of SMEs and other participants, we develop the solutions, and the solutions are replicated. I would like to also talk about the advantages that the club members and other participants can get. Since we are university-based clubs, the clubs are operated in universities. Companies can develop their business models, and they can also use their products for solving African issues, so they can develop new markets in Africa. And because the business models developed jointly by the students, they can also expand their global networks. For students, they come up with solutions for the issues that they identify. And because the clubs have members that are students, they can have or build student-based partnership. And since they are involved in identifying the solutions as well as the problems, they can also have internship opportunities in the companies that participate in the project. In order to achieve the sustainability of these clubs, we have to have demand. We are seeing increase in ODA, both from the African and Korean government. And since the clubs operate in universities, we can use the university budget and KOICA budget. We can also get additional funding from crowdfunding, which will be used for the club activities. The graph presents the increase of ODA funding of the Korean government, and we'd like to have access to it so that they can help sustain the club activities.
Club. It has the opportunity to do a lot of projects, so ranging from promoting awareness to reporting progress and transfer of knowledge in different forms. I would like to just focus on one example that is possible and can be used as a pilot project. Just the previous team spoke about problems in Ghana, so we will have to remember that each country or each press has a unique problem and there are unique solutions to unique problems. I'm going to give an example of Nigeria because it's my country and I can talk about it. For example, the Nigerian government currently has embarked on projects to promote renewable energy, and one of the focuses its target now is solar panels and solar voltaic panel distribution. I would like to point out one major challenge that I discovered. The life cycle or the lifespan for some of these projects are maybe 20 years. So if in 20 years these panels are bad, what happens to it? In my country, unfortunately, there isn't much institutions for recycling. So an example would be a university student, having discovered that recycling is a challenge in my country. For example, I came to Korea to do a master's degree here. I have connected with some Korean students here. I'm also talking with Korean SMEs or small, medium businesses, and I found out that in Korea, recycling is not a problem for them. So I can take this technology back to my country and solve a potential problem with regards to pollution that might come from abandoning these solar panels if recycling wasn't done. So that would be one major example that we can use. We don't have time to talk about the different methods, but that was just a sample of how university students can interact with each other under the basis of the Climate Green Club through the universities. Thank you.
네, thank you so much for your presentation. 자, 이제 코멘트와 심사평을 드릴 차례인데요. 코멘트나 질문이 있으신 멘토분들께서는 손을 들어주셔서 마이크를 옆에 계신 마이크를 이용해 주시면 되겠습니다.
If you have a question or if you have comments, please use the microphone. Thank you very much for your presentation. In order to respond to climate change, students and young people can act as a main agent. But in order to realize youth green clubs, we have to have enabling policies. Maybe those policies should be provided or developed by local governments or local municipalities. So we need to think about whether local municipalities of the regions where the green clubs are created have any enabling supportive policies. And another thing about crowdfunding, of course, it is an innovative way of getting financing. And if you want to have the citizen engagement, of course, you can always rely on the external funding. But sometimes you can find the funding from the local community itself, so that the local community is also involved in solving the problems of their own community. So that was my comment.
Add is, as we're all aware, there are always policies, and I think one of the reasons why we chose this idea is we have to go beyond policies, because policies are always in place. My country, I can give you a stack of documents showing policy improvements, but we want action, and the idea behind this idea is to jump the process of having to go through policies again. So having universities, and if you notice in terms of the financial consideration, we put the typical source of funding, governments, crowdfunding and all. But what's the major source here is business, because I believe business is what drives policy. Government can create policy, but if there's no business to drive this policy, it's not going to work. So that's why I gave the major example of the Korean small and medium enterprises, because when businesses see an opportunity to make profits, they can bring in their technology, they can bring in their services. So it's a win-win situation. For the Korean firms, they're making profits. For the local people, they are solving these problems. Another thing that I don't know if you mentioned it, is with regards to the proposals. These proposals are being developed by students in universities. So that means these are research problems by the local students that are solving actual policies. So that way, we're bypassing we already assume that policies are on ground to solve this problem. So what we're looking here is to jump into the business and jump into problem solving immediately. And one of the best ways that I have found is that business is what drives policy.
네.
네, 아마도 정책
The reason that the other mentor mentioned policy was that we have to leverage policies, existing policies. Of course, the business participation for solving issues, which is really important, because you always have to approach issues with tangible or viable solutions, which I highly evaluate. More than anything else, as young people, you want to work with SMEs and the local communities, and you also identify clearly the needs of the local communities. So thank you very much for your presentation. And any other comments or questions? First of all, I'd like to say thank you for your presentation and for your hard work. Listening to the presentation, I was really impressed by the fact that you were able to come up with this quality products despite the short time given to your preparation. As was mentioned, of course, the Youth Green Club really requires common understanding by all the stakeholders. And we also need equal contribution or participation. So I don't have a question, but I would like to say that I hope after the presentation on Youth Green Club, I hope that there will be continued efforts to identify common issues, and I hope to see active engagement of young people from Korea and Africa. Thank you very much for your comment. We have 2 to 3 minutes left. Are there any other questions or comments to this team? If not, we will wrap up the second presentation. That was meet a solution or future solution. Any other comments or
Of course, with very short time, one of the key things we try to mention is that for financial considerations, being a youth club, it doesn't have to start with the big projects. Like we said, it can be with the promotion and awareness. Those are low cost. We can do it over Zoom. We can do it through social media. Taking the steps to do actual projects like what I talked about is the big project, and we can do that. For example, if we start in Nigeria and we start with one university in Nigeria, one university in Korea, and one SME, if it's successful and everybody can see the results that every party benefited from it, then every other university in different countries can apply the same method, and there is a reference that you can work with. Thank you.
네, 고맙습니다. 네, 발표 감사드립니다. 미래
Thank you very much for your presentation. Once again, please give a big hand to the Mire solution or future solution.
Next, the last team for the first theme is Green Wave. Please welcome them to the stage. Shall we start? Yes. Great meet you. We are Green Wave, and today we are going to talk about Korea-Africa Joint Agenda, Smart Farm, and CDM, Solutions Against Climate Change. This is our agenda. First, we want to analyze existing policies and also talk about expected benefits. And third, talk about financing and funding with stakeholders. The existing policy analysis, we are not simply seeking for transition to new energy, but we have to consider both the climate change and growth. There are two ways to respond to climate change. First is mitigating, reducing the greenhouse gas emission. Second is adapting to the climate change. In our opinion, mitigation is important, but I think adaptation should be given priority. In the Africa, survival emission accounts for a big portion. So we need to have green growth policies that considers both environment and economy. And we thought about CDM and smart farm. And by using smart farm technology for coffee production in Middle Africa. Let's say Kenyan coffee. Compared to 5 years ago, the output of coffee has been declined by 15%, and the harvest timing has also been changed by climate change. So why smart farm technology for coffee production?
East Africa, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, these countries are known for coffee production, and this is a commodity that brings in a lot of income for African farmers. The problem is, as my friend just mentioned, because of lack of information on the state of the crop, there is a big loss in the coffee products. So we are losing nearly 20% of total produce by just not meeting the quality requirement of the coffee that is supposed to be sent to the market. People are losing a lot of money. So this is because of our traditional farming. So the yield is very low, and many crops end up diseased, and we don't control diseases. And the weather challenges also cause more, even more loss. So once harvesting, we have even more harvest of coffee that is not fit for the market. Coffee is very sensitive. If it doesn't meet a certain density, the seed is going to be thrown away. So we are losing this big amount of coffee because it can't meet the quality requirement of the market. Therefore, we dispose this coffee because we have nothing else to do with it. So once we dispose it, this is going to become like a domino effect. It starts to emit methane, contributing to climate change. And here, there are many technologies that can be suggested to prevent this, to mitigate this problem. One of them is carbon capture and storage. But however, agriculture doesn't emit carbon dioxide. So in Africa, this technology is not very useful because what we are emitting is methane. So therefore, this technology would be economically not feasible and probably useless in terms of agriculture. So we are choosing to go with a technology that people can easily adapt with. This is smart farming. So with smart farming, people can use their phone and they can actually control the weather. They can have enough data on the weather, and they can know exactly when to harvest the coffee without delaying to harvest and letting the beans go to waste. Another thing is that they can mitigate the beans by only pressing the camera on the leaves of the coffee. They can have some vital information to address, to start being in contact with the agronomes and actually be able to mitigate the disease before it spreads and attack other coffee produce. So we choose smart farming as a means to improve the production yield and also as a means to reverse the climate change that is caused by methane emission from coffee products. So our colleague Yunjin is going to continue more explaining on how our system can have a big impact on coffee products in East Africa.
So I would like to talk about expected benefits. And before I talk about the expected benefits, well, it is to create a sustainable platform. Before we start this project, we have to understand the peculiar environment of Korea and Africa. Korea has advanced ICT technology. Africa has abundant natural renewable energy like hydropower, PV, photovoltaic power. And by using smart farm technology, we can mobilize renewable energy in Africa. According to FAO, Africa spends a lot of money to import food, more than $50 billion. To make Africa self-sufficient in food, we can use smart farm using renewable energy to reduce CO2 emission, which can be translated into acquiring CER, certified emission reduction. And we can use CER to get the funding we need. And let me talk about collaboration with other organizations and funding mechanism. We thought Kenyan coffee could be the starting point. UNFCCC or GCF can provide us with the approval for CER model, and then they will create an environment where private sector institutions can participate and invest in this project. So we can make our project more sustainable. Unlike advanced countries, we have to consider green growth that considers economy and environment at the same time. We need to create a sustainable funding model so that we can continue to operate CDM that can make our coffee business and response to climate change sustainable. Thank you very much. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you very much. And from the mentors, give us your feedback or questions. So in the international regime related to climate change, you said that currently there is stronger emphasis on mitigation than adaptation, but you have created your solution based on the requirements of Africa, which was impressive. And another point I would like to make is that CDM is an existing mechanism. And why is CDM not working effectively in Africa? CDM is more widely used in other regions than Africa. So what kind of preparation do you need for Africa so that they can effectively adopt CDM? So if you can think about that, what kind of requirements or preparation should be made in Africa, that would be better. There are many ODA projects for CDM for Bangladesh and other countries, but not in Africa. But in the case of Bangladesh, I heard it was a very successful project. But we heard that getting the approval for CDM for UNFCCC was very strict and very challenging. And we also have to get the approval from the central government of the host nation like Bangladesh, which is also very cumbersome. So administrative process of getting the approval, I heard, was very time-consuming. In the case of Africa, we can expect similar problems. So before we begin this project, for example, Kenya, we need to talk to the Kenyan government and envision a timeline in advance. Thank you very much. Is there any other comments from the mentors? You have about 5 minutes left. Yes, please go ahead. Transition to renewable energy. I think I heard there's no enough policies for transitioning to renewable energy, but I believe there are many existing policies for transitioning to renewable energy. So are you going to be creating a new policy, or are you going to be expanding on the existing policy? And for infrastructure, there could be other infrastructure other than smart farm. However, given the current infrastructure in Africa, when we provide the tools, they probably were not used in the most effective manner because of lack of infrastructure. So I think you need to consider that as well. Smart farming. Smart farming has been promoted by other international agencies before, but I heard it's very expensive. Unless it is creating its own profit, it's going to generate a lot of cost for international organization or the government alone to handle. So that's my point.
For the point, if I heard very well, you mentioned that the renewable energies implementation, for example, has met with huge challenges in Africa, and and also there are many organizations trying to implement smart farming in Africa, and they are failing because the lack of basic infrastructures. And what we mentioned, we are not developing a new policy. This is a policy that already is being discussed in the East African Parliament. So here is like 5 countries already are meeting, discussing how to put in place the measures that can attract private and the other government funders into the smart farming in Africa. They have recognized that there is a big role, especially on commercial commodities such as coffee, that they can actually prevent by having smart farming. So as we mentioned, this technology doesn't require so much of infrastructure. That's why we didn't go with renewable energies that require so much infrastructure demand so that you can be able to implement it. So we chose smart farming because it is easy to teach someone that with your phone, you can actually be able to track the weather, you can be able to forecast the weather for 6 months to come. From there, you will know exactly that if I am expecting to harvest my coffee in April, so the rainy season will come after I have taken out my coffee before it is damaged in the farm. Another thing is disease control can be easily mitigated by just having information on which type of disease are attacking those crops, and those also requires digitalizing our agricultural economy. So I think smart farming will be successful, and the policies are in place, so there is no worries about that.
짧은 코멘트 하나만 드리겠는데요.
I have a very short comment. The previous mentor has said that clean development mechanism is a very difficult scheme to implement. So it's a very challenging to use it for initial business model. So another previous step for CDM would be private-public partnership or blended or hybrid banking with ODA agencies, combination of project financing and grant scheme, getting some investment as well. So there are various funding mechanisms. So you can consider that first before you move on to the next stage. But I think overall it was a very well-planned business model. It was very impressive. Thank you very much for the advice. Please give a big round of applause to Green Wave.
Thank you very much. Now let us move on to the next presentations on the topic of creative policies to raise awareness of Africa in Korea. Now, the first team to make a presentation on the second topic is Met Africa. Please welcome them with a big hand.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I and my colleague will be presenting our concept, Met Africa, in this fourth Korean Africa Youth Forum, and it's Korean and Africa through the metaverse. The analysis of the existing policy in Korea mindset is that Africa is usually one country, but this awareness is false because the Korean economic ties with Africa only began blossoming in the early 2000s. So these alliances are still limited to a few African countries, and Korean CSOs are involved in about 39 countries, usually on grassroots welfare schemes, making the image of Africa in the Korean populace as a charitarian concept. This puts a stumbling block in prospective partnership between Africa and Korea. And some of these reasons for this issue is usually because of the difference in culture and linguistic barriers, and not enough reports on African news in Korean media platform, even though Koreans are very active on social media. Our concept is based on metaverse. So what is metaverse? It's a 3D virtual world where all activities such as social, economic, and cultural activities take place just like in the real world. And these days, metaverse is widely marketed as the next version of the internet. But is metaverse really a futuristic idea? It might sound futuristically distant, but early versions already exist today. In this era of digitalization and the global pandemic we are facing, digital platforms have gained popularity in recent years as people have shifted their activities online. And now it's accelerating the speed of metaverse application in all areas of culture and life. The current context of metaverse can be seen in games like Fortnite and Roblox and Zepeto, which is a Korean social media network that have been popular among teenagers And nowadays, even non-gamers and older populations have begin to start to see the real-life applications of using metaverse in their daily life. The Korean Digital New Deal is a national strategy to leverage the digital and artificial intelligence tools to improve healthcare, central infrastructure, and economic in its recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic economic crisis. Seoul Metropolitan City has also jumped on this bandwagon by creating the Seoul Metaverse Tour, which will create virtual mayor offices, spaces for business sector, tourist zones, and fashion industries, etc. A total of 49 trillion won is expected to be invested by 2025. Africa too is also on this bandwagon, even though just at the beginning stages. With Edgeverse, the first metaverse in Africa, being announced this year, Africa, in the quest for technological advancement, is on an upward trend and is renowned as a continent of potential. With a young population and plentiful natural resources, the 54 African countries collaborating with Korea might open up a world of possibilities in this metaverse. So our idea for overcoming this issue is promoting Korean Africa awareness and relations through the metaverse world, such as metaverse tourism. For example, Korean government investing in a platform like Zepeto, which is developed by the Korean-based Naver Z Corporation, and invite Africans through their various respective Korean embassies to use this virtual travel with the help of African guides and avatars, and therefore be able to explore the beauty of African continents from the comfort of their very home, creating a space for cultural exchange and awareness, and introducing safe virtual tourism for exploration of Africa. Also, this concept can be used in education, as the partnership will be applied in education and emphasizing technology transfer and even research. Experts in their various fields, both in Africa and Korea, can host e-classrooms and e-symposiums to teach virtual users about the different aspects of Africa and the different countries in Africa, as well as their potential benefits. In the business sector, metaverse can be used for the promotion of the exchange of African goods and services to Korea and vice versa. For example, exhibitions displaying works from both regions, such as art bazaars and auctions, and lifestyle and cultural marketplaces selling unique specialties unique to each region. For example, K-food being accessible to Africans, and African foods being accessible to Koreans in the metaverse for purchase, and then being delivered in real life to each other. More ideas can be used in this metaverse, not only for tourism, but also for like cross-country networking among Koreans and Africans. The implementation stage might go in this format, like in these 4 stages, with stage 1 being the establishment of plan, content planning, overview, and schematics. And the stage 2 is the creation of the virtual space, which is the metaverse, by a 3D spatial information and development team. And stage 3 will be the launch of detailed events and timelines in which users can now actively participate in the metaverse. And stage 4 will consist of user data analysis and feedback for system improvement and overall maintenance, which will be fed back into stage 1, and the whole cycle begins. Stage 4.5 will be a branch off of stage 4, where the data analysis results can be used to plan for real-life events for a more enhanced impact. Now, why would people want to use our metaverse? For example, the success of Squid Game, which is Korean drama, and Black Panther proves the extent to which digitalization is impacting our society, especially among the young populace. Riding on the coattails of popular media and non-media trends, our metaverse can spark interest in users with events, skins based on viral trends. For the next part of the presentation, my colleague will take over.
기관 협력부터 이제 간략하게
Now I'd like to talk about the institutional cooperation. So these are some of the things that different agencies can do. Maybe the KAF will be the main authority, and because we have limitations in reaching individual African countries, maybe we can work with African Union and create a consultative body. And there may be other agencies like Korea Africa Research Institute, and we can also work with ambassadors and create partnership for our activities. Now I'd like to talk about the financial aspect of our project. There are 3 things that I would like to talk about. if you look at the purpose or objectives of the Korea Africa Foundation, I understand that they have education to promote understanding between Korea and Africa. And our activities also are in line with the purpose of the foundation, so we can secure funding from Korea Africa Foundation. And recently, Korea New Deal 2.0 was announced, and one of the strategies to promote metaverse, and a total of 2.5 trillion won will be invested. And maybe we can send our proposal to the Ministry of Science and ICT to secure government budget. We recently checked the government project announcement, and there will be 390 or so projects. And now the number of projects increased to 1,700. So that represents a lot of corporate interest in the project. So I think we have access to the ministry's budget. We can also contact the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other government agencies to get the funding. For example, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have a project to provide 100 million Korean won to promote the public sector diplomacy. So these are the type of funding that we can get for the activities. And we expect that we'll be able to promote the mutual understanding between Korea and Africa. And there is global forum and other investment briefings, and those events can be organized on the Metaverse platform, and we can collect data and analyze them. Even though there are limited number of users as of now of the Metaverse platform, I think we'll be able to increase the number of users, and they will be effective in expanding the Korea Africa Foundation projects and activities. We are not sure what kind of changes we will continue to have because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I believe that the metaverse is one of the safest ways for us to engage each other. With that, I'll finish my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. Now, we'll listen to the comments and questions of the mentors. Thank you very much for your presentation. Listening to your presentation, of course, Metaverse can be an effective platform. Africa used to be a country that's far away from Korea, but on the platform we can get closer to the continent, I think. Of course, the platform itself can be very useful. Basically, we have to have mutual interest of connecting each other. Whether it be education or business, you have to have at least a mutual understanding and mutual interest to begin with. Of course, there are a lot of projects conducted by the Korea Africa Foundation, and there are also other projects happening in the private sector. Of course, the platform itself can be quite useful in connecting people of Korea and Africa. But we need to have more interest, and that kind of interest can be enhanced by having continuous in-person engagement. Only then any projects or activities happening in Metaverse will be more successful. Thank you very much for your comment. Any other comments from the team or any other questions from the mentors? Any questions or comments? Please raise your hand. I have a question. But before asking you the question, maybe other mentors have felt that this team did a lot of research before making this presentation, and also talked about the application of metaverse on different areas like education and tourism and others. My question is, who will be the users of the metaverse? Are they the general public or the citizens?
Our concept will be everyone, and depending on your interest or age grade, there will, because metaverse, just like the real world, has different sections for different people. In the real life, you have the young people who are interested in games. They go to the PC bank. They have their own groups, and you have the adults who are more interested in like the business aspect or the businessmen. Just like I said, metaverse is same as the real world, just virtually. And with that platform, we can create different corners with interest to different target zones. So it's not limited to just one target 대상.
네, 다른 분
Any other comments or questions? We have 2 minutes or so. Yes, please go ahead. I think this idea of using metaverse is really good. Thank you for your hard work. As was mentioned by Mr. Lee Jong-gil, at the end of the day, of course, you have to have the platform, and by using this type of platform, we can overcome the physical limitations or constraints. But if you want to use the metaverse, first you have to have a big traction of young people. You have to have more detailed ideas, more specific contents to attract the young people to use the metaverse. What makes you really want to learn about Africa by becoming a user of the metaverse? Of course, you can leverage the platform, but you really have to have a good content. About the financial considerations, of course, you gave us big ideas like getting access to funding from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the budget of the New Deal, which is quite difficult. Maybe you can create really interesting content with small amount of money and then create a success story. Then that project will be really useful to obtain any financial support from other organizations. You do not have a good legal standing. It is not a established organization, which will limit you to get access to the government funding or funding from other big organizations. So you have to start small. Thank you very much. Your time is up. Once again, please give them a big hand. It was Met Africa.
Thank you. We would like to move on to the next team, Africa Meets Korea. Yes, please come up to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rene, and my team from Seoul National University, we are going to present you this program under the policy topic called Africa Meets Korea. It's under the big policy of strengthening multicultural understanding of African countries to Korean community. This is the outline. We will go into the problem description, a little bit of existing policies analysis, then problems with those, then we explain the idea, then some expected outcomes, then financial and institutional consideration. Anytime you meet Korean people, they ask you two main questions, and I wonder if any of you have ever asked this question: where are you from? Did anybody ask that question when they meet an African person? Okay, so they ask so many other questions like, what kind of food do you like? We know this is the kimchi land and they like a lot of pork and so many other things. What kind of clothes do you wear? What kind of music do you play? And these very interesting questions. And there's so many other questions. And we ask ourselves, what do Koreans know about Africa? And what do they want to know about Africa? And there are so many African communities here, African students, embassies, and how can we leverage the knowledge of Africans living here to the Korean community? Then mostly we have so many young people in Korea. How can we disseminate the knowledge that we have in those people? So we came up with this idea, and we'll explain later. So we have existing legal policies and programs about multicultural education policy. We have this 2020 that focuses on school subjects and Korean and languages and career. We also have another one called Multicultural Education Policy 2021 Blueprint that focuses mostly on equality of learning. But there are so many existing programs with these policies. Mostly they focus on language programs, mostly Koreans, and their programs are in silos, and there's lack of persistency, and even being an African, I didn't find any information of these programs online, so I can't find them, and it's very hard to find them. And even people providing this very limited knowledge of Africa by the Koreans own organizers. So we came up with this idea about Africa Meets Korea. It's a platform that bridges Korea to Africa through cultural and social education activities. I will explain later in those activities. But the mission is to provide a better learning understanding of African countries to Koreans. We're gonna promote a mutual understanding and exchange of culture. The purpose will develop some educational contents. We'll prepare some exhibitions, a sale booth to expose Africa to provide a place for exchange. Then our motivation, there's one question that always comes, says, why would a Korean want to come in the Africa Meets Korea, or why would a Korean students want to learn about this? Africa is a promising future, and the knowledge is the key for business and cooperation. So these are the main policy action items in our program. Number one, we will teach Korean youth in middle and high schools about African countries. Africa is not a continent, it's made of 54 countries. We will use African students clubs here in Korea. For example, I'm from Rwanda, we have more than 200 African students here, and we can go to one of the high schools and we can teach students about Rwanda, what kind of food, and those questions I talked about, what kind of food do we eat, where is Rwanda located, what kind of language do you speak, and so many of the information that those students might need. We will also want to create a mobile application about that kind of content we're going to create. Then those students can access those information. And we will organize also the second action item is we're going to organize the African Meets Korea event. This is not the African festival, no. It's an educational event where we'll be performing African dances and performances, and games and theater and so on. We will have booths for African cuisine where we can exhibit the African cuisine and how to cook, and African snacks on how to make and so on. The African fashion, the kitenges and African dresses and how they make it, and galleria of so many African artifacts and African good practices. And all this can be also available on the platform. So what are the expected effects? Number one, the young Koreans will have a glimpse of what is happening in Africa, what is Africa, and how is Africa. Then there will be a better understanding of African countries, mostly for Korean, not only for middle school and elementary students. Then this will help in promoting collaboration. There might be some collaboration between African and Korean. Then there will be some opportunities for investment. If you want to invest in Africa, you need to have knowledge of Africa. There will be some startup companies, maybe how to make this, how to make that, they can go to Africa and make the interpret and tourism. The financial confederation, so the African Meets Korea event, we're gonna do promotion, logistics, transportation and materials, but of course we can leverage on the African communities here in Korea. We have Rwandan community, community of Ethiopian, and the East African community, and so on. The institutions, there will be some partnerships with African communities in Korea and students, African students in Korea. We have Minister of Education and Minister of Culture. Then you can also have partnership with schools in case they need to know about Africa. They can invite me. I can go and tell them about my country. They can invite my friend from Ghana, can go and teach the kids about his country. Thank you very much. Welcome questions.
네, 발표 잘 들었습니다. 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now it's time to listen to the comments or questions raised by the mentors. Any feedback or questions about this presentation? We already have multicultural policies, educational policies, and I think it was really good to link your project with the existing projects. And your ideas are really workable. But existing multicultural education policies are geared toward to assisting the multicultural families, especially those coming from East Asian countries. And I think the existing policies can be extended to include the people coming from African continents. So I think your policies or the ideas are really viable. So thank you very much for your presentation.
네, 조언 감사합니다. 더 덧붙이고
Any other comments?
No, we are okay. That is it.
오케이. 네, 더 질문이나 심사평
Are there any other comments? We have about 6 minutes left. I was able to understand that you really thought through to make this presentation. As I understand, the ideas that you proposed can be realized. Of course, I do not think that we are having active discussions on these ideas as of now, but I think all these ideas are viable. In some schools, they have extra curriculum activities and other classes where African students can really teach the students about African countries. Of course, we want to see more classes on Africa. However, we need to think about how to create demand and how to expand the opportunities to teach Korean students about Africa. I hope to see more detailed ideas on how to identify those demand and opportunities. There is Africa Week and Africa Festival or other events that are similar to the Africa Meets Korea event that you're planning to organize. However, there are limitations in-person events because of COVID-19 pandemic, and you need to think about what you can do amid the COVID-19 pandemic situation, and also you need to think about how you want to organize this type of event after the pandemic is over, how to attract the participants. That is, of course, you can introduce the African food, you can present African performance and culture, but you have to have the traction point. So I hope to see more detailed ideas on how you'll be able to attract the participants to those events. In relation to that, since you're from Rwanda, maybe you can organize an event with the Rwandan community as a small project and then expand it to an African event.
Number one, we know that we are in pandemic, corona pandemic situation, and we cannot organize these kind of events. Even if I want to go and give some lecture about my country to middle school students, maybe mostly it's not possible because of corona pandemic. but still we can use the other social medias for that. But we expect that once this corona pandemic is over, we can have a very big success for that. And number two, of course, we have some Rwandan community events here. But we invite, of course, some Korean, but mostly our colleagues from maybe Seoul National University or my colleagues from the dome. But we also have actually the East African community here. We have the event once a year, but the first event we had was 2019, and after that, it was corona pandemic. But of course, we can also leverage from those existing platforms and invite more Koreans and maybe engage with schools. Some schools, Korean schools, who maybe want to learn about Africa, maybe they can invite one of us. Actually, number two, we have some leaders. All these African communities, they have leaders, chairman, and presidents here in Korea. We can use those existing leaders to maybe help us in these projects.
Thank you. 네, 더 있을까요, 혹시?
Are there any other comments or questions? Yes. Thank you. There were many ideas that we discussed. There are already good contents developed and available. We thought about Africa Day, but it already exists. And we also thought of Africa Korea Day, and it already exists. And we now thought about education-related forums, and there are also business forums, and there are also cultural events on Africa. And so instead of the Seoul metropolitan area, maybe it's good to have events that happen in other cities and regions, and such event already exists. But as a Korean person born and raised in Korea, why I've never heard about such events? Maybe that means exposure is not enough. So we came up with the idea of approaching the public education system. Maybe the content should be provided in the public education system. In US and Canada, there are curriculum on multiculturalism. Of course, it would be really nice to have multicultural courses in primary education. Of course, there are policies on promoting multiculturalism, but those still remain a theory, and those multicultural related curriculum are confined to multicultural families from East Asian countries. And maybe we can organize an event where we have African students cooking African food to Korean people, and maybe it will increase the exposure of African culture to the Korean audience, and it will eventually help improve the awareness on African countries. So time is up, and it was Africa Miss Korea. Once again, please give them a big hand. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Next, the last but not least, Together for Korea, Africa. Please welcome this team with a big hand. Good afternoon. This is our last presentation, and thank you for your patience.
Of 5 people, and 3 of us come from Cote d'Ivoire, and we have a Korean, Abena, and one of us from Burkina Faso. In my case, I travel a lot in Korea, and I met many African people here, and those African people are facing a lot of problems, and those problems are very like frustrating problem. For example, when Korean people go to Africa, we used to think that they are Chinese, and when we see them, when African people see them, they try to greet them in Chinese, and they don't support that kind of comportment from the other people. So we African people, we also feel the same thing when we come to Korea, and when Korean people don't recognize us, and they think we are all from the same country. It's the same case. So from this situation, we try to get some solution. We try to find some solution, and just now we are trying to show the solution to you. But before that, we want to expose a little bit the background. And before that, I also want to say it's very regrettable because we made a video before coming. We realized a video about that thing. We asked Korean people who live in, some of them are living in Daegu, in Daejeon, and in Seoul. We asked 5 Korean people exactly, and we asked them about Africa, if they know Africa, if they know African culture, what do they think about Africa, African people. And some of them knows because they watch football, and because some of them have African friends, but they are not a lot, and most of them are not able to name 5 countries of Africa. But actually Africa have like around 60 countries in Africa, but they are not able to give 6 countries in Africa. So that is very painful for us coming from Africa. And all of them think that all people in Africa are same. They think we are all black. So this is due to many factors that we try to explain here. And also they don't know many things about Africa. They don't know that Africa is the best country in the world who produce like gold and diamond and everything. And actually we come from Cote d'Ivoire, and I know that everyone here likes chocolate, and they don't know like which country is the first producer of chocolate in the world. Actually it's Cote d'Ivoire, and we produce 40% of the chocolate in the world, but Koreans don't know that. It's very painful for everyone. And also we also think about like Korea can get many benefits helping Africa, because when we see those maps here, we can say that Africa is the country who will have more young people until 2050, and this can be a very important point for Korea to help Africa. And also the young people in Africa are more and more interested in K-pop, and Korean people investing in Africa can also enhance the power. So Africa can be supported in time crisis about climate change, and also get educational various good method that Korea has installed here. In exchange, Korea can help Africa to solve the world conflict and epidemic and all the problem Africa has in itself. But this kind of solutions is not easy to find, because in Africa we have around 1,500 languages against only 1 language in Korea. So there's also another problem here. In Korea, it's easy to communicate, but in Africa, it's very difficult to communicate. And when it comes to go to Africa and get some news, it's very difficult. It doesn't match, because 1,500 language, and each one gives his point of view from his way to see things. So, extending the channel dedicated for Africa and Korea, information will help very much in this project. And we also try to solve we also try to talk about the gender equality problem, because in Africa it's less than Korea. In Korea we can see like everyone do the same thing, but in Africa it's still not equal. So to scale up the awareness of knowledge of Africa for literature major and special lecture, and Korea for its experience in the education and for dedicated institution means to contribute to the reduction of the illiteracy of Africa. So if Korea wants to be like strong in Africa, it has to go by another way, like France, but Europe and China already use another way to approach Korea, to approach Africa, and that way is very difficult to support from Africa people. And if Korea goes to Africa with this same way, it will not work. So Korea have to change the way and go with the uptake of the win-win relationship. So I think I will leave my colleague here finish the presentation. We have 3 minutes, sorry.
네, 안녕하십니까.
Good afternoon. I am Chun Ha-young, and I'll talk about the framework. Basically, we are talking about 4 outcomes. Out of those 4 outcomes, I want to talk about 2 outcomes first. First outcome is sustainable capacity building and literacy for Africa. And Korean people can have a better understanding of Africa by building their capacity. Based on UNESCO's paradigm, Korea cities and regions can have related policies, strategies, and guidelines. And in Korea, we still do not have enough understanding of Africa to improve understanding. We can work with African companies, African people living in Korea, and then they can make more leading roles in carrying out African campaigns. And many startup companies, NGOs, SMEs in Korea are interested in going into Africa, and NGOs or government agencies and private companies they can have communication with African people, African institutions in Korea, so that they can have more objective understanding of information related to Africa. And we need to enhance literacy model for Africa. In the case of Korea, in university, media, or novels or poems, we still do not have enough information, accurate information about Africa, but through literature, if we can have better understanding and more understanding of Africa, that would be great. So we need to work with media companies, broadcasting companies to do that. And various exhibitions or concerts can be hosted to improve understanding of Africa in Korea. Last but not least, many government agencies in Korea or the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, they can work with government counterparts to develop their own policies. Last but not, that's all for now. That's all the time we have for this team. Thank you very much for your presentation. So please, mentors, give us your comments or questions. And please raise your hand if you do so. Yes? Thank you very much. Yeah, it's regrettable that you could not finish your presentation, but you even prepared a logical framework, so I could see that you really worked hard for this. I really wanted to hear the remaining part of your presentation, like through education, you can improve perception of Africa. I think you were talking about an integrated approach, and how can you talk about how the individual outcomes are correlated with each other in just one or two sentences? How these individual programs can achieve an integrated objective, how they can create synergy? We have prepared 3 outcomes, and the first outcome is capacity building, and second outcome is to improve media literacy, literature literacy for Africa. Last outcome is for both Africa and Korea. Young people, women, youth are vulnerable people, and empowerment should be improved for these vulnerable groups of people. And for empowerment, we need to give better access to information to vulnerable people so that the vulnerable people in Korea can have more friendly way of understanding Africa. We want to build such a model. Any other questions? So you have 3 minutes. In terms of policy, they are really essential policies that we really need to adopt. But it boils down to feasibility, and it boils down to who's going to implement this. Because in existing ODA programs, there were some similar activities already, but you could have identified deficiencies in existing policies or existing activities, and how you are going to make up for such deficiencies in existing policies. Have you thought about that? In Korea, all the young people go to school, but there are some single mothers or some young people who do not go to school, and migrant workers, migrant people, and refugee children, they are not legally protected. So for these vulnerable groups of youth, to give them better access to more friendly information about youth and Africa, I think the government can develop the framework for this kind of accessibility. Do you know 16-day activism? This happens every year, hosted by UN. This is for gender equality campaign. As the previous speaker has mentioned, in Korea and Africa, well, there's a lot of interest in K-pop. Many K-pop fans. To improve gender equality and in order to have better understanding of African culture, we can mix Afro-pop with K-pop and develop a campaign song together. Thank you very much. You have about 50 seconds remaining. If there is no further question, we would like to wrap up now. Please give a big round of applause to Together for Africa. Please, thank you very much.
So we listened to all 6 presentations. We were able to enjoy the presentations, and we are really curious about who's going to be the winner. Now, the deliberation committee will collect the scorecards from all the mentors, and we are going to have the award ceremony at 6:45. I'd like to ask all the mentors to move to the room Opal, and please make sure that you have the scorecard with you. In the lobby outside this hall, we have prepared some coffee and tea, so during the break, you can enjoy the coffee or tea. In order to prevent the spread of COVID-19 virus, please make sure that you drink your tea or coffee in your seat with the protection board erected. So we will see you again at 6:45.
네, 이제 곧 시상식을
Ladies and gentlemen, the award
'네, 여러분 3시간 동안
3 million won. And the first agenda, Korea-Africa Joint Agenda for the Climate Change Response, the winning team is
I'd like to invite Yeon-gi, President of Korea Africa Foundation, who will come up to the stage and say a few words before we award the presents to the winners and announce the winners. I'd like to first of all thank all the participants for their hard work for today's forum. And I think it was a ideation marathon, and we were able to witness a lot of participants engaging in heated discussion. And you were really passionate, and your work will be really valuable in the next 20 to 30 years. And I believe that your ideas will bear fruits, and it will make significant contributions to the future of Korea and Africa. Of course, we are going to announce the winners, but I believe that all of you are the winners of today's forum. I would like to once again express my appreciation to all of you for your hard work despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Korea Africa Foundation will continue to work hard in order to promote cooperation exchange between Korea and Africa. I would like to look forward to your continued interest and support. And I'd like to also ask you to actively participate in Korea Africa Foundation events. Please give him a big round of applause. Once again, thank you very much for organizing this important event. So I think all of you are very much nervous, and so am I. Who's going to win the award? Now we're going to announce the first winner of Korea Africa Youth Ideathon. And the award goes to Mira Solution. Congratulations. So all the team members of Mira Solution, come up to the stage. Congratulations. Please come up to the stage and receive the award and the prize money of 3 million Korean won. Congratulations. So please come up to the stage. 손휘주, 손다여, and Babatobi Ayo, the Mira Solution or Future Solution. So you proposed a good idea for future cooperation and exchange between Korea and Africa. We're going to now take a commemorative photo. Thank you, and once again, congratulations. So please kindly remain on the stage. Now, on the second topic of the forum, which is creative policies to raise awareness of Africa in Korea. And Now, I'm going to announce the winner. Who's going to win the second prize? Korea Africa Youth Ideathon, and the winner is. The winner is. Congratulations, Meta Africa. Congratulations. The members: 신윤정, Patience Mahoro, Darcy Dominic Muheto, Oliver Chiamaka Edwards, please come up to the stage. So they propose a good idea to raise awareness of Korea in Korea and really made a good proposal of creative policies. We are going to now take a commemorative photo. Please face the camera and please have a big smile. Congratulations. Now I'd like to invite all the participants today onto the stage. All the participants and the mentors, please come up to the stage. We are going to have a group photo. And please bring the certificate with you. So everyone, please come up to the stage and bring your certificate with you. Please bring the certificate of participation. All the participants, the President of Korea Africa Foundation, and the mentors, we are going to have a group photo.
네, 앞으로 좀 더 가까이 와주시길 바라겠습니다.
So please gather together. So that we can have everyone in the picture. And please hold your certificate in front of you.
So could you come to the center, get closer to the center so that we can all have you in one picture?
네, we have to see all of your faces. Can you tilt your certificate a little bit? Yes, we have to see your face. We can't see your face over there. Yes, please lower your certificate and don't cover any others' faces. All right, looks good. Okay, with smiling eyes. 1, 2, 3. Okay, for our second picture, we'll say Korea, Africa, fighting. On the count of 3, okay? 1, 2, 3. Korea, Africa, fighting! Yay! 네, 축하드립니다. A big round of applause for everyone. 여러분 수고해주신 모든 분에게 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 고생 많으셨습니다. 네, 오늘 진행된 2021 한아프리카
So all the participants, presenters of Korea Africa Youth Ideathon, and the mentors and the participants on YouTube, I would like to say thank you all for your participation. And this wraps up the Korea Africa Youth Ideathon. Thank you very much.